Have you ever stopped, I mean really stopped, to think about something like safety eyewear? Seems simple, right? But what does it actually take to protect millions of eyes globally? From a busy construction site in New York to a factory floor in Mumbai, maybe a high-tech lab in Berlin. It's not just about the glasses themselves. It reflects these huge global shifts, these trends and priorities. Okay, let's unpack this a bit. We're talking about an industry that's, well, fundamental for workplace safety everywhere. And its growth, it tells quite a story about how global industry is developing. Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're jumping into the surprisingly fascinating world of the global safety eyewear market. Now, our mission isn't to drown you in data points, not at all. It's really to pull out the most important insights from some pretty detailed research, give you a shortcut basically to understanding where this market's been since 2021 and where it's heading through 2033. So you can expect to hear about the overall market size, the key growth rates, and crucially where the big shifts are happening regionally.
We'll find some surprising hot spots, maybe some areas growing a bit slower, and a really unique lens, actually, for looking at global industrial development and, of course, safety standards.
Exactly. And what's so fascinating here is how this specific market data, safety glasses, right, how it can light up these much broader economic and regulatory changes happening across continents. It's more than just what specs are selling. It really speaks to the health and the evolving standards of global industry.
That's a great point. It's not just numbers. It's about, worker well-being on a global scale. So let's start with that big picture then. How big are we talking? What's the overall growth story look like?
The scale is pretty impressive when you look at it. Back in 2021, global sales revenue for safety eyewear, it was estimated at almost $3.6 billion.
Right, nearly 3.6 billion. And that's definitely not a static figure. The research shows a very clear upward trajectory. It's projected to hit over 4.1 billion by 2025 and then keep climbing to over 5.7 billion by 2033. So that reflects a pretty solid compound annual growth rate, the CAGR, of just under 4%. About 3.94%.
Okay, just under 4% globally. Yeah, and that kind of steady growth, it's not just a number. It really suggests a growing global commitment to workplace safety. And it points to continued industrial expansion, too. It shows resilience, but also real promise for the future.
Okay, so the overall picture is solid growth, impressive numbers, but I guess the really juicy details emerge when we slice it by region, right?
Yeah.
This is where it gets, really interesting, as you said. Different parts of the world, different speeds, different reasons. So let's break down that global picture. Maybe start with North America.
Okay, so North America generated, just over $1 billion in sales revenue in 2021?
Just over $1 billion, yes. $1,038 million, roughly.
And that's expected to reach about $1.5 billion by 2033. So the overall growth rate there is around 3.4%.
3.355% of the region overall, yeah.
Okay. And within North America, I assume the U.S. is the biggest slice of that pie.
Oh, absolutely. The U.S. accounted for the largest share, around $900 million in 2021, heading towards $1.3 billion by 2033. It's a CAGR of about 3.2%. Right. But interestingly, the data showed Canada with a stronger upward trend. Is that right? While the U.S. is growing steadily, Canada's rate is higher, over 4%.
That's right, a fantastic observation. Canada's AGR is notably higher at 4.313%. While the U.S. market is obviously much larger in absolute terms, Canada's faster growth rate, well, it could be tied to a few things, maybe significant investments in sectors like mining or energy. Those inherently demand high levels of PPE, including eyewear.
Oh, okay.
It might also reflect, a stronger push for more stringent safety compliance across their industries recently.
That makes sense. And Mexico also contributing.
Yes, Mexico's showing steady growth too, moving from about 57 million in 2021 towards 87 million by 2033. That's a CAGR of about 3.6%. Solid contribution.
Okay, let's shift across the Atlantic then. Europe, another big market, showing consistent growth too, from around 945 million in 2021.
Correct. Almost 945 million in 2021, and forecast to reach over 1.4 billion by 2033. The CAGR there is about 3.58%, quite similar to North America overall.
But within Europe, there seem to be some big differences. Germany really stood out, didn't it? One of the strongest performers.
Absolutely. Germany showed very strong growth, a CAGR of 4.316%. Quite robust.
Which is interesting when you compare it to, say, Russia. Their growth was much more modest, less than 2% annual growth.
Yes, Russia's CAGR was projected at 1.827%, so quite a difference there.
How does that difference, just over 2 percentage points in growth rate between Germany and Russia, how does that play out in the real world?
Well, that seemingly small percentage point difference compounded over a decade, it adds up to a significant divergence. Germany's higher growth likely reflects its strong and probably still expanding manufacturing base, constantly adopting newer safety standards, investing in technology.
Right.
Russia's slower pace, on the other hand, it might suggest a more mature industrial sector, perhaps facing some economic constraints, leading to less rapid investment in new safety gear compared to some other European nations.
I see. That makes sense. And beyond those two extremes in Europe, the UK looked pretty solid.
Yes, the UK showed solid growth, nearly 4% CAGR, around 3.9%. Spain and Sweden also saw healthy expansion, both around 3.8, 3.9%.
Okay.
Even smaller, established markets like Switzerland are showing steady increases, around 3% CAGR. Denmark slightly higher at 3.3%.
What about France? I recall seeing a slightly lower number there.
France was a bit more modest, yeah, just under 3% CAGR, around 2.96%. And Luxembourg, being a much smaller market, grew a bit slower still, about 2.5%. Italy was around 3.25%.
Okay, so a varied picture in Europe, but generally growing. Now, let's talk about what the data calls the real growth engine, Asia Pacific. This region seems to be the powerhouse, doesn't it?
Unquestionably, Asia Pacific is where the most dynamic growth is happening. It registered revenues over $1 billion in 2021, 1.056 billion to be precise.
And it's expected to hit nearly 1.9 billion by 2033.
1.833 billion by 2033, yes. And that delivers the highest regional CAGR of all the major regions we looked at, over 4.7% annually.
Wow, 4.7% across that whole vast region.
Yeah.
What's fueling that? It's such a diverse mix of economies.
It really is, and it's a fascinating mix of factors driving it. You've got rapid industrialization happening across large parts of APAC. You've got a huge and growing workforce. And critically, you're seeing increasingly stringent safety regulations being adopted, often, to meet international standards for export or because of growing internal awareness.
And India really stood out within APAC, right?
Right.
Some very significant growth there.
India's growth is remarkable. Its CAGR is projected at almost 5.5%, 5.494%. That's the highest among the specific APAC countries detailed. It points directly to, its booming manufacturing and construction sectors, massive infrastructure projects too.
And China, of course. Can't ignore China. Huge driver there, too.
Absolutely, a massive driver. China's revenue is projected to climb from around 300 million in 2021 to over 530 million by 2033. That's a robust CAGR of nearly 5%, 4.919%.
Okay. And other parts of APAC. Singapore,
Yeah.
Southeast Asia.
Also very strong. Singapore's CAGR is just over 5%. And Southeast Asia as a whole also growing at over 5%, 5.243% actually. Again, points to significant industrial expansion in those subregions.
It's interesting that even the more established APAC markets are still growing strongly. Japan, South Korea.
Yes, that's notable too. Japan's looking at over 4% CAGR. South Korea slightly higher, also over 4%. Australia around 3.7%. Taiwan over 4.2%. So consistent, strong growth pretty much across the board in APAC.
Okay, incredible momentum there. Let's move on. South America. How does that region stack up?
South America also shows solid growth. It expanded from about $244 million in 2021 and is projected to reach over $400 million by 2033. That reflects an annual growth rate, a CAGR of just over 4.2%, so quite healthy.
And any particular leaders within South America?
Well, Argentina and Chile are showing particularly strong KGRs, both over 4.3%, maybe even closer to 4.6% for Argentina and 4.4% for Chile, which could indicate, new industrial projects kicking off, or perhaps a renewed focus on enhancing worker safety in key sectors like mining or agriculture there. Brazil, being the region's largest economy, also shows solid growth, just over 4% KGR. Peru and Colombia are growing steadily too, around 3.7 to 4%.
Got it. Okay, next up, the Middle East, projected to reach over 280 million by 2033.
That's right, around 280.8 million with a regional CAGR of about 4.1%. Again, quite solid.
What stands out for you in the Middle East numbers?
Well, here you see the UAE, Turkey, and Saudi Arabia as particularly strong performers. Their growth rates are actually above that regional average. UAE is looking at nearly 4.75% CAGR, Turkey around 4.5%, Saudi Arabia about 4.2%.
And what's driving that?
It likely reflects those ongoing economic diversification efforts, trying to move beyond just oil and gas. There are massive investments in infrastructure, construction, developing new industrial zones. All of that requires a significant and growing supply of safety eyewear. Qatar and Egypt also showing decent growth around 3.7 to 3.9%.
Makes sense. Okay, finally, let's touch on Africa. The market there started around 136 million in 2021.
Yes, about 136.5 million, and it's expected to grow to over 220 million by 2033. The overall CAGR for Africa is around 3.5, 3.6%.
And the main markets within Africa, South
Yeah.
Africa, Nigeria.
Those are the leaders, yes. South Africa is showing a healthy growth rate, actually above the regional average at over 4.1% CAGR. Nigeria is also contributing significantly, with growth projected around 3.7, 3.8% annually. The rest of Africa combined shows a slightly slower growth rate, under 3%.
Okay, so bringing all these regional threads together,
Yeah.
what's the bigger picture takeaway from all this detailed data?
Well, if we connect it all back, the really striking thing is the consistent growth across almost all regions.
Yeah.
It just underscores how fundamental safety eyewear has become, really regardless of a country's specific stage of economic development. It's a basic necessity. However, those varying growth rates we discussed, from India's really rapid expansion at nearly 5.5% down to Russia's more modest pace below 2%, they really highlight the nuances.
Right.
Things like the speed of industrialization in different places, how strictly safety regulations are actually enforced on the ground, maybe even cultural attitudes towards workplace safety. They all play a role. So it's actually a powerful lens, this specific market, for viewing broader global development trends. It shows us not just numbers, but real stories of progress and evolving standards.
So wrapping this up, what does this all mean for you, our listeners?
I think our deep dive into the global safety eyewear market paints a really clear picture. It's a market experiencing steady, diversified growth pretty much everywhere. It shows real resilience and promise. You see it in mature markets like North America and Europe, but also in those rapidly expanding regions like Asia Pacific and the emerging opportunities in South America, the Middle East, and Africa. It seems clear that protecting workers' eyes is a universally recognized need and a growing imperative.
And it does raise an important question as we look forward, doesn't it? Beyond just the numbers, what sort of societal shifts are driving this? Is it purely regulation, or is there a deeper, growing global awareness of occupational health and safety? And looking ahead, how might innovation, new materials, better designs, maybe even smart eyewear with embedded tech, how might that accelerate this critical market even further in the years to come?
Exactly. Those are great questions. It really is fascinating how one specific market segment, like safety eyewear, can act almost like a barometer, a way to gauge broader industrial development, regulatory shifts, maybe even technological adoption around the world. So we encourage you to think about what these trends mean for workers, for industries, for the global economy as a whole. Maybe the next time you see someone putting on safety glasses, you'll have a bit more appreciation for the huge, growing global industry that supports that simple, vital piece of protection. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
Okay, so when you think about workplace safety gear, maybe you picture those basic clear safety glasses, right?
Yeah, the standard issue ones.
But what if I told you that, well, that whole world of safety eyewear is actually going through this massive transformation right now?
Oh, it really is. It's evolving incredibly quickly. The global market for safety eyewear is driven by so much more than just, basic impact protection these days.
And that's exactly what we're getting into today. It's our mission for this deep dive.
Mm-hmm.
We want to uncover the key forces behind this, things like changing regulations, definitely growing awareness too.
And some really cutting-edge innovation.
Exactly. All these things are reshaping demand and, honestly, redefining what protective eyewear even is in today's workplace.
And hopefully by the end of our chat, you'll have a really solid, quick but thorough grasp of the main drivers.
Yeah, and the challenges too, right? It's not all straightforward.
No, definitely not. So the drivers, the surprising hurdles, and the really exciting future trends in this, let's face it, vital part of the PPE industry.
Consider it your shortcut to getting fully up to speed.
Exactly.
So where should we start? Let's kick things off with what's really fueling all this growth. What's the main engine here?
Well, number one, without a doubt, has to be stringent regulations.
Right, the rules.
Yeah, governments, regulatory bodies all over the world, they're increasingly mandating protective eyewear, especially in hazardous environments.
You mean like manufacturing, construction?
Precisely. Manufacturing, construction, mining, chemical processing, those are the big ones. But what's really interesting, I think,
Yeah.
is how the penalties, the legal and financial consequences for workplace injuries have really pushed compliance.
Ah, So it's not just a slap on the wrist anymore.
Not at all.
Yeah.
It makes safety eyewear not just a nice-to-have, but an absolute must-have for managing risk. It's about protecting the company's bottom line, its reputation. It's fundamentally changing the ROI calculation for safety gear.
That's a really strong motivator. But is it just about avoiding the fines, or are we seeing like a genuine cultural shift towards prioritizing safety?
That's a great question, and I think it ties directly into the next point, which is that rising awareness.
Okay.
So beyond just the rules coming down from above, there's definitely this growing understanding among both employers and the workers themselves about the real costs of eye injuries.
You mean the long-term health impacts, economic costs?
Both. Exactly, and that awareness. It's prompting a more proactive investment in safety programs overall.
So companies are looking for specific features now, not just any glasses.
Yes, absolutely. Things like impact-resistant lenses naturally, but also chemical splash protection, proper UV filtering, and it's not just heavy industry anymore.
Whoa.
Like labs, clean rooms, healthcare settings. The risks are different, maybe subtle, but just as critical.
Right, you mentioned healthcare. That sector seems like it's become a huge driver on its own.
It really has. I mean, the global expansion of healthcare services, plus all the accelerated lab research we're seeing, it makes protective eyewear just essential, a critical barrier.
Against contamination, infectious agents.
Exactly. You see surgeons, lab techs, frontline healthcare workers, they're adopting safety eyewear much more consistently now. It's standard procedure.
And that's happening everywhere, developed and developing economies.
Yes, it's really solidifying demand across the board. It just shows how widespread the need has become.
Okay, so we've got regulations, awareness, healthcare growth, pushing things forward. But you mentioned hurdles. It's not all easy adoption.
No, definitely not. There are some significant bumps in the road limiting, full adoption everywhere.
Like what?
Well, one major one is noncompliance, particularly in informal sectors or smaller businesses.
Right, places where maybe oversight isn't as strong.
Exactly. It raises a tough question, really. How do you effectively enforce safety standards in environments that have limited resources? In many developing countries or just, informal work situations, enforcing safety rules can be really tough. Maybe lack of resources, maybe lack of awareness.
And the smaller companies.
Yeah, smaller businesses, maybe contract-based employers. They often underestimate, or maybe sometimes just disregard, how important good quality protective eyewear is. And that really holds back market penetration in those areas.
And then there's the factor. Let's be honest, sometimes safety glasses are just plain uncomfortable. Or they look terrible.
Yes, that's a huge factor.
I remember those old ones from school shop class. Awful. You only wore them when the teacher was looking right at you.
It's true. If something's uncomfortable or looks bad, people just won't wear it consistently. And wearing protective glasses for hours on end, it can lead to discomfort. Fogging up is a classic problem.
Yeah, or restricted vision.
Right. And it's kind of ironic, isn't it? The very thing meant to protect you gets rejected because it's just annoying to wear.
So bulky designs, bad fit.
Especially in places where maybe you're interacting with the public or it's not a purely industrial setting, it discourages use. You get sporadic compliance, which kind of defeats the whole purpose.
Okay, another issue you flagged was the problem of fakes or just low-quality stuff flooding the market.
Yes, that's a serious problem. The market gets swamped with cheap, non-certified eyewear. Stuff that looks the part, maybe, but offers hardly any real protection.
And that hurts everyone.
It really does. It erodes trust from consumers, and it damages the reputation of the good brands, the ones actually investing in proper testing and certified manufacturing.
So the quality companies end up competing on price.
Sometimes they feel forced to, yeah. Competing on price rather than on actual safety performance. And for a product that's critical for safety, that's a really problematic dynamic. It just devalues the whole category.
Okay, so we have the drivers, we have the hurdles. Let's shift to the future now. What are the really exciting, cutting-edge trends that are reshaping safety eyewear?
Right. This is where it gets interesting.
You mentioned the integration of style and comfort. That seems huge.
It is. Leading manufacturers are really focusing now on blending robust protection with, decent aesthetics and ergonomic design.
So what does that look like in practice?
Innovations like really lightweight frames, much better anti-fog coatings that actually work, built-in UV protection as standard, adjustable nose pads for a better fit.
Making it less of a chore to wear?
Exactly. By making safety eyewear stylish and comfortable, manufacturers aren't just selling a product, they're tackling that deep psychological barrier to wearing it in the first place.
Interesting way to put it.
It shifts the paradigm, doesn't it? Safety stops being seen as this burden and becomes almost like an accessory. It encourages voluntary adoption, which is a really powerful market-driven safety strategy.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And then there's the need for prescription safety eyewear, right? As, the workforce maybe gets older or just needs vision correction.
Absolutely crucial. You can't protect your eyes properly if you can't see clearly through the protection.
Especially for precision work.
Exactly. There's a definite growing need for protective glasses that incorporate prescription lenses, but also meet those tough impact resistance standards, ANSI Z87.1, for example.
Right.
It's super relevant in fields like lab research, technical services, detailed manufacturing. Anywhere clear, vision is critical for doing the job safely and well. Imagine trying intricate work with blurry vision or trying to wear safety glasses over your regular glasses.
Yeah, been there.
Good.
Awkward. Okay, and the last trend, the really futuristic one perhaps, is smart eyewear.
Yes, embedding advanced tech right into the glasses.
So what can these smart glasses actually do? What's the value?
Well, the value proposition is potentially enormous. Think about features like heads-up displays right in your field of vision,
Wow.
or live video streaming, maybe for remote assistance, sensor integration to monitor the environment, or even the wearer's condition.
Okay, so how's that used?
It's proving invaluable for things like training, showing instructions visually, remote assistance where an expert can see what the worker sees and guide them, real-time monitoring in high-risk jobs.
So it improves decision-making,
Yeah.
productivity.
All of the above.
Yeah.
Better decisions, potentially higher productivity, and enhanced worker protection. It's honestly a potential game changer for both efficiency and safety.
So wrapping this all up then, what we've really sketched out is a safety eyewear market. It's incredibly dynamic. It's getting much more sophisticated.
Yeah, it's this constant balancing act, isn't it, between the absolute need for regulatory compliance, the very practical demands for worker comfort and acceptance,
Right.
and then harnessing this exciting potential of new technology and innovation.
And it seems like as industries keep prioritizing occupational safety, which they generally are, this market is just going to keep evolving, probably quite quickly.
Absolutely. It's definitely a space to watch, which kind of leads to a final thought, maybe something for you, the listener, to chew on.
Okay.
How might this convergence, we've talked about advanced technology blending with personal style and comfort, how might that actually transform protective eyewear? Could it go from being just a required safety item?
Something you have to wear.
Just something genuinely desirable. A piece of personal tech that workers actively want to wear. Could that shift the whole paradigm from just compliance to personal choice driving safety?